everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mystery Bible on podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, you have Dan and Brian and Joel, your fearless trifecta of co-hosts, and we are joined in studio with our honored guest, L.A. Marzulli. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you're very familiar with that name. He comes up all the time. I have a bio in front of me of the things that L.A. Marzulli has done. But what you probably need to know is he's widely recognized as one of the godfathers of the weird spaces that we talk about all the time. He started with some Nephilim material, and now he's books and documentaries, and on every subject, he has the most well-rounded approach to this. And we have him to thank for a handful of our recent exciting guests like Karen Wilkinson, Vicky Joy Anderson, and others who we've really enjoyed and who you all have really enjoyed. So he's helped those people have a platform. They were kind enough to make an introduction. And today we have 1 hour with L.A. Marzulli, who has published hundreds of hours of content, which means he has tens of thousands of hours of research behind every single one of those topics. So our approach today with L.A. Marzulli is, instead of deep diving on one single topic, what we want to do is talk about broadly what he's learned and what's going on in the world. So, L.A. Marzulli, thank you so much for joining us in the Mystery Bible On podcast.
Well, great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So before we hit record, then I told you what I was going to ask. You said, that's extremely broad. Can you make it any narrower? And I said, I don't want to, because I want you to riff and go crazy with this question. L.A. Marzulli, it seems like it's getting kind of crazy out there. What in the world is going on?
Well, 2,000 years ago, there was an itinerant preacher, itinerant rabbi, who was walking around the streets of Jerusalem and ticking off a whole bunch of people with what he was saying. The late Chuck Missler used to say that when they come out of the temple, Jesus gives them a private briefing, a very private briefing. They ask him, what will be the signs at the end of the age? You know, the apostles, they're amazing, but, just look at the Chosen film, and some people love it, some people hate it. I mean, just take a deep breath. I think it's fantastic, but because it's like being there in some ways. That one scene, I'll go down a rabbit trail. The very first season, when he calls Mary, calls her by her name, and she just freezes. There wasn't a dry eye in our living room. We were all bawling like a bunch of babies, because that's what he does to us on one level or another. So, they ask him what's going on, and Jesus gives them a very confidential briefing, to use Chuck Missler's term. And they ask him, what will be the signs of the end of the age, of your return? I mean, remember the apostles, these guys aren't schooled in theology. None of them are rabbis. They know stuff, but they don't know stuff. But they've been handpicked. I just love it. It's like, the 11 Stooges or the 12 Stooges, if there is such a thing. And Peter's always sticking his foot in his mouth. He just does it. It's just all the time. And, nobody, I'll go down another rabbit trail. Nobody understands the cross. Nobody gets it, including the dragon. I should have a note here so when I can find my way out of the rabbit trail. Hold on. Sometimes I get stuck and I can't find my way out. But let me just write this down, then we'll go down the rabbit trail.
Well, I'm suspecting you're going to the place where Paul particularly says if they had understood what they were doing, they would have made different choices. I think that's 1 Corinthians 6, but I'd have to.
It's Colossians. You're right there, but Colossians, he's the firstborn of creation, all that. Then it's the firstborn of the dead. It's like
Colossians chapter 1.
Yeah. He's preeminent in all things. So in my opinion, and this is what the enemy didn't get. Nobody got it, especially the dragon. Jesus becomes death. God dies. If you can imagine such a thing. His body is in the tomb. He's dead. He's fully God, fully man, but he's dead. The body is in the tomb. It's not a swoon fest. He's dead. They know it. He's gone. The Romans aren't screwing around here. The spear in the side, dead. We've got the Shroud of Turin, which I believe is forensic proof of his resurrection. But where does he go? He goes down to Tartarus. Peter tells us this. And he preaches to the spirits that are in prison, why are they in why are those spirits in prison? This goes back from the flood, Book of Enoch, 200 watcher angels that are coming down. They do the unthinkable. The flood of Noah happens. Everybody's destroyed except for 8 people. This is my wheelhouse. This is where the Nephilim come into the whole deal. And only 8 people survive. This is not mythos. This is reality. And the dragon almost wins at this point. Only 8 people are uncontaminated and a handful of animals to repopulate the whole thing again. And so, Genesis 3:15, in my opinion, is the gateway to the entire biblical narrative. If we don't understand Genesis 3:15, then when we get to Genesis 6, or the Tower of Babel, or Abraham and the kings, or Sodom and Gomorrah, or finally the conquest of Canaan, we don't understand really what's going on. We don't understand the severity of the God of the Old Testament, who's maniacal and capricious, and, he kind of gets in your face and destroys everybody. It's like, wah! And 44 years ago, when I became a Christian, I didn't get it either. But Jesus becomes death, which is just mind-boggling. He's the firstborn of the dead. I mean, I'm not making this up. It's in Colossians. The firstborn of the dead, so that he might be preeminent in all things. It's like twang. The enemy can't get it. The enemy has no idea of what's about to happen. The apostles don't get it. Mary doesn't get it. Nobody gets it. Jesus gets it. And then, of course, his body is resurrected. His soul and spirit resurrect with the fleshly body. And in that moment of time, the Shroud of Turin is created. He rises from the dead. It's a type of the rapture. The dead in Christ will rise first. Boom. Here we are. So you want to know what's going on. The same Jesus who did all of that, and I got down 2 rabbit trails surfacing, he gives this confidential briefing. So circling around to what we originally started with. And in that confidential briefing with his apostles, he says, they ask him, what's it going to be like? And he says, wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. Many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. So I just did a Days of Chaos presentation down in Orlando, Florida, Prophecy Watchers, and you can, check that out. You can sign up for live streaming and watch it for like 6 months, and it's a lot of great speakers. But one of the things I show are the false Christ. One guy in particular, John Allen Miller from Australia, who's absolutely hysterical. I am Jesus. And he says it like, let me get rid of the male here. I mean, he says it like that, I'm Jesus, deal with it. And it's like, he's so arrogant, it's unbelievable. And I show it. I mean, I show what he says and not what I'm saying. And then you've got the nutcase up in Siberia, who, by the way, was arrested. But it shows this, it's in the middle of winter and they're all dressed in these costumes. Remember, if you ever walk into a place and everybody's dressed in a costume, flee to the nearest exit. So they're all dressed in costumes and he's supposed to be Jesus. And then I show the guy down in Mexico, Enrique Cristo, who's the Mexican Jesus. He wears this plastic crown of thorns and he's got the part. All these guys, it's just hysterical. And John Allen Miller circling back to him. I was Jesus in the 1st century, and this is my wife, and she was Mary Magdalene in the 1st century, and we're back again. I'm Jesus, deal with it. It's like, everything. I mean, nobody's saying I'm Buddha. Nobody's saying that, right? I'm the reincarnation of Krishna. Nobody's saying that. But boy, are there false Christs running all over the place. And then Enrique Cristo down in Mexico, they all have uniforms, again, costumes, run to the nearest exit. They all have costumes. And he goes on and on and on about, being the Christ and all this stuff. The guy in Russia, there's one scene in the clip I show where he's got all these loaves of bread on a table and he's like this. Well, nothing's happening. What are you doing? You're doing some nonsense. The guy's fully demon possessed. All these people are. But so many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. So there we go. I mean, that's a graphic example of that. Wars and rumors of war. Well, look around. Isn't it funny under Donald Trump? He's going to get us into World War III. Oh, my God. We're all going to die. Right? Remember the news media? All in lockstep, totally controlled, just lockstep like this. So wars and rumors of war. You've got Ukraine. How many people are you listening even know what the meat grinder is? Do you know what the meat grinder is? The meat grinder is in the Ukraine-Russian war where you go into the section called the meat grinder, you're ground up in the meat. You're dead. I mean, very few people come out of that. I mean, the casualties are through the roof. That's what they are. It's not a pretty picture. We don't hear anything about it. We don't get any footage on any mainstream media. All we're told is Trump is bad, Biden is good. It's all Trump's fault about the border wall. Biden is doing a great job. There is no inflation. Yak, 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 yak. Oh, Prince Charles, King Charles has prostate cancer. Taylor Swift is, can anybody hum a Taylor Swift song? You can't do it, can you?
I'm sure some people can, Joel, but the rest of us can't.
I mean, I just sit there and scratch my head and go, And then recently there's this whole thing where she's out there doing satanic rituals during the concerts, which is, so what else is new?
Well, and in her music videos, and I'm not trying to throw her under the bus, but people need to pay attention to, you watch some of these music videos and she has song lyrics that say, karma is God and it's good to me and don't you wish it was good to you, and then shows rituals in the woods in costumes, by the way.
Yeah, rituals in the woods and they're all a bunch of witches. I mean, nothing changes. It's just, she's just the newest satanic anointed one that goes out. So we've got wars and rumors of wars. Then we've got what's happening in the Middle East. And this is prophetic. So Ukraine, I get it. There's all sorts of unrest, like in Haiti. There's unrest all over the place. And in order to find it, you got to go outside the mainstream media, which is a total joke at this point. We get no news. But you'll know everything about Taylor Swift and her relationship with the goofy football player, like we're all supposed to hold our breath and care about it. Distraction. Look over here, a shiny object. Meanwhile, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. You can't allow 10 million undocumented people into this country. No other country on this planet would ever allow that. But somehow, if you say anything, you're a racist, you're an Islamophobe, you're a xenophobe. You're always painted with these goofy labels. Well, why don't we just sit down and talk about it? How is bringing in 10 million people undocumented into this country, how is that making your life better? Let's go up this summer to Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard and all that when they start storming the beaches, just like they did here in Malibu. All the liberals were going like, oh my gosh, there's landing on the beach. Now what? Oh, really? You don't like it when it's in your town, do you? But it's okay if it's in those flyover places like Texas and Oklahoma and Colorado. We're just going to fly over those places. We really don't care.
I was born in El Paso, Texas, so it's right there.
Yeah, you get it. You understand what I'm talking about. So you've got all this unrest globally. What is prophetic and what we're looking at right now, and I think it's it's over 150 days since October 7th. Since the war started in Israel. Gaza is the place where the Nephilim, one of the last strongholds of the Nephilim, 3,500 years ago when Joshua and Caleb are pressing the conquest of a promised land, Gaza is inhabited. They never take Gaza. The children of Israel never take Gaza. Goliath from Gath, right around the Gaza area. Isn't it interesting? Thousands of years later, what are we looking at? And I believe, and this is conjecture, I believe that there's a spirit in Gaza which has never been deposed, a territorial spirit. And this is why the virulent anti-Semitism, which makes no sense at all. Also, the sexual torture and the heinous genocide, which was practiced on October 7th, is through the roof. But all we hear about, to the river, to the sea, Palestine must be free. And people have no idea their history. So let's back that up before we get into the prophecy. And I'm going to write prophecy here so I can circle back and not get stuck down the rabbit trail.
It's all right, LA. They already named me the Bunny Man because of all the rabbit trails.
All the rabbit trails. Well, this podcast is largely held together by rabbit trails. So you're right. You're native territory here.
So, the prophecy in the biblical prophetic narrative is telling us exactly what's going to happen. So Gaza was never conquered by the Israelis, and it's very problematic. October 7th, you get these crazy people, and I mean they're crazy, absolutely insane.
We've said multiple times on the podcast, as we've talked specifically about this, we've said if you look at the level of depravity, this is demonic action. When you're talking about totally wallowing in the blood of women and children and sexual violence, this is not your average terrorist attack. There's a lot more going on.
No, it's not. This is a whole different thing, and it's got supernatural underpinnings. What these people who chant from the river to the sea have no idea about is their history. And this is why every chance I get, I do a quick lecture. At the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was completely dismantled. The Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, sided with Germany. Germany lost, so the Brits, the British, and the French came into the Ottoman Empire and dismantled it, took it apart. So Northern Africa became, which was all under the Ottoman Empire, got carved up. In this, Egypt became independent, Libya became independent, and the newly formed nations of Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine was carved up, just created out of thin air, all part of the Ottoman Empire. So Palestine was given to the Jews. Jordan was given to the Palestinians. And they reneged on it. They carved it back up, I think 2 or 3 different times. Well, it's too much land for the Jews. No, we're going to. So they did. They carved it back up. And now we have modern day Israel. So, of course, the Arabs hate the Jews and sit them down and go, well, why do you hate the Jews? Well, because our book tells us to hate the Jews. So this, again, is something that's incredibly supernatural. But that's where it's from. It's from the dark side. Makes no sense at all. No sense at all. So those nations, no one questions Iraq or Lebanon or Syria or Jordan. Somehow that's okay. But those Jews, ooh, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. I would posit that once Israel is done cleaning up Gaza, and we're coming into Ramadan now, so I think it's going to get very gnarly. And I get it. The hostages, I mean, you can't trust these people. I will not go into a Muslim country. I will not set foot in a Muslim country. I won't do it. There's places like the Great Pyramid of Egypt. I would love to see that, but I don't trust them. Because, I've heard stories. They can just come up and arrest you. Now you're in prison, and who knows how long you're there for. Or even if you get out. Maybe you have a little accident. Same thing in Turkey. I'd love to go see Göbekli Tepe. Won't do it. Sorry. And I get it. Christians go there all the time. I get it, but I'm not going. I'm not setting foot in a Muslim country at this point. No stinking way. So why is it that Israel was supposed to give up the land? Well, if Israel's going to give up the land, then let's have all those other countries, Iraq and Jordan and Syria and Lebanon, they can give it up back up to the Turks. Just give it over back. Just give it back to the Turks, okay? And we'll go from there. But no one's willing to do that now, are they?
Only the other thing is that phrase from the river to the sea. It's not saying we want the land. It's saying we want the genocide of the Israel nation. We want all of the Jews dead in that area. And people need to understand that it's not a harmless slogan. It's calling for the eradication of a people group.
Yeah, they're not talking about boundaries. They're talking about bloodlines.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And that is, so, you get all these goofy college kids over here who have no idea of their history, no idea what's going on. And they're up there, Palestine will be free. Why don't we start showing some of these kids what happened on October 7th and make it as graphic as possible so they can see people beheaded, babies beheaded in front of their mothers, women raped and their vaginas probed with 10-inch nails. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is freaking demonic. This is psycho stuff. This is your worst horror movie. Don't even give it to me. The Israelis have every right to go in and wipe these people off and completely, utterly destroy Hamas. All the tunnels, all the infrastructure, all the leaders, and the leaders should be brought into a world court. Isn't it funny how they're always pointing the finger at Israel and calling, Israel this? Well, why don't we round up, Sinwar and all these other clowns and bring them before a world court? And let's show some of the pictures, so the people of the world can see what's going on. So what's prophetic about here, circling back out of the rabbit trail, what's prophetic here is the Bible tells us in the last days some very, very specific prophecies that will happen. Now, am I saying that these prophecies are happening? No, I'm not, but they might be. And that's why it's like, look, The analogy I use, it's halftime in a football game. The score is tied 50-50, or, let's say 14-14. And, it's a 50-50 chance. That's where the 50-50 comes from. It's a 50-50 chance. They're both equally, anything can happen. So you can't call it at halftime. I mean, you can call it if you want to, but you don't know. I don't know. But I'm looking, and I watch every single day. There's several sites I go to, Raptor News in Israel, different papers in Israel, Jerusalem Post, Israel News, Divine Justice, to name a few that I go to on a daily basis. Lebanon, the northern border, has not stopped since day one. Since day one, you've got at least 150,000 Israelis that have been displaced from their homes and are now living in central Israel, in hotels, in rented whatever. I mean, so everything stops. Education stops, business stops, everything stops because of what's going on the northern border. The Hezbollah was supposed to retreat back to the Litani River, which is about 15 miles from the border. They're not doing that, and they never will do that. Every day, today, there was rocket fire in Kiryat Shimona, and the Nephilim Tour, I'm a Trail of a Nephilim Tour. Most of our, not all, but many of our sites are in the northern border. Mount Hermon, Gilgal Raphaim, all those places where we go. Tel Gezer isn't, but that's one out of all the other ones. And Gilgal Raphaim, I mean, you can't, all that's sealed off. You can't go there. Is there going to be a Nephilim Tour in 2025? I doubt it very much so. This ain't going away. So the bottom line is Gaza continues. They will go into Rafah. They will go into Rafah. The heck with Ramadan. They've got to go into Rafah. They've got to get Sinwar. No one will take the Palestinians. Isn't it amazing? Why is it that none of the Arab nations want the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians? Why don't they want them? Egypt's going, oh, not coming here. Jordan,
the
Saudi
border
Arabia,
wall in Egypt is a sight
back.
to be seen. The Egyptian border with
razor wire.
Palestine, it's razor wire, and it's 20 feet tall,
wire.
And there's armed guards on the other side of it.
Oh yeah, isn't that?
Yeah, it's brutal.
They're Islamophobics, aren't they? Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Our media, man, I'm telling you, it's just, what a joke. What a freaking joke it is. You ever watch, let me just finish this. I go to Fox News every day, and I just laugh hysterically at what their lead stories are. So the lead story is Nikki Haley drops out, but won't endorse Trump. Well, why not reverse that? Who cares what Nikki Haley does, and talk about Donald winning the nomination and sweeping, 14 out of 15 primaries? Oh, no, we're not going to talk about that. Nikki Haley's the lead story. It's just like, spin it. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's a circus, and we're being kind of having our faces rubbed in a 3-ring circus, while the stuff that really matters is conveniently going very unnoticed. So you mentioned several times that there's a supernatural element to these things, and what I'm trying to think of the listener right now who's starting to dip their toe in the water, and they're going, okay, I understand that there's strange world events. I understand that the Bible talks about these things, and if you squint one way or the other, you may be able to see some of that. And we just had an episode recording that was released with Ken Johnson, and he's a Dead Sea Scrolls expert, and he did a really good job of laying out a very measured, thoughtful, no hand-waving case of, here's the kinds of things that we're seeing, and here's what else we're going to need to see if we're going to make a case that prophecy is being fulfilled. And he made the case that there were a few in particular that were absolutely being fulfilled, and then a few that have not yet been fulfilled that he's expecting to see. So for people who are interested in that, go back and listen to that episode. But what I'd like to do, LA, is somebody who's going, all right, I'm hearing a lot about this, but I don't really know what to do, where to start. I'm looking over your left shoulder there. You've got elongated skulls in the background. And what is a rabbit hole that if somebody spends an intellectually honest 2 to 6 hours, they're going to come up going, oh, I got to rethink some things?
Well, read Psalm 83, which Bill Salas really put on the map. Salas is the one that's talking about Israel expanding her borders. Read Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. What was it? A couple of months ago, Israel stated to Iran that if you You mess with us, we will destroy Damascus. And I've got a film I show in my Days of Chaos clip. I just showed it. Complete destruction all around Damascus. The suburbs are ruinous. There's nothing left. They're completely destroyed. And they continue to do so, Isaiah 17. The big one is Ezekiel 38:39. And so it could be Psalm 83. Then you get the destruction of the Bashir reactor, which ties into Jeremiah. Then you get the destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17. Then the big daddy happens, Ezekiel 38:39. And I show a picture of Erdogan from Turkey, Putin from Russia, and Raisi from Iran. And those are the three main players in the Ezekiel prophecies, and they're on stage together. And what makes this very telling is that Erdogan and Raisi hate each other because one is Shia and the other one is Sunni Muslim. So Erdogan from Turkey, the president of Turkey, is Sunni Muslim, and Raisi from Iran is Shia Muslim. And they have been at odds basically for 1,300 years with each other. There they are on the same stage. There's an ancient saying in the Middle East, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is exactly what we're looking at. They all hate Israel. And isn't it interesting that Russia, the hook in the jaw, is pulled down? Turkey is looking at that territory, and they're already in bed. Those three players are already in bed together. And Russia recently was working with Libya and providing material aid, whatever. And Libya is P-U-T, and that is one of the nations also in the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. In my opinion, we're looking at a neutron bomb that goes off on the mountains of Israel. And it's interesting, when you read that prophecy, we know that no one touches the bones for 6 months. The bodies, no one touches them. Then people go out and they mark where the bones are, but still no one touches them. Then professional buriers go out and collect the bones and bury them downwind by the Dead Sea. So you've got, many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. Wars and rumors of wars. Famines. Look around what's going on in Africa. Africa's India. I mean, these people just can't feed themselves. And it's like the poverty level is just, it's we're all Americans. We're not used to this. Spend the week in Peru outside of Lima, and you'll see it. It's a two-caste system in Peru. But then in India and in Africa, the poverty is just staggering, mind-boggling. So you've got famines, pestilence. Look at the COVID-19 thing. 6-7 million people were killed from COVID, but millions of people have died from AIDS. Millions of people have died from AIDS. So you've got wars and rumors of war. Many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ. Famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places. If you were to do a graph, the earthquakes are like through the roof. And they happen like all over the place. There's a rise in earthquakes and volcanic activity. And in my opinion, that's Jesus sort of giving us a supernatural bone, as it were. Earthquakes in diverse places. Well, how would you know if you're living in Palestine 2,000 years ago or in Jerusalem? How would you know about an earthquake in Fukushima? You wouldn't, unless a boat landed, where Tel Aviv is now, and people came, hey, there was a big earthquake 6 months ago. Oh, really? What was it like? That's the only way. Now we get all the news at the speed of live when they light up the grid. So
now also the earthquakes, because of all the sensors they put around the world.
Yeah.
We know about a lot of earthquakes that can happen in your area that you don't even feel, but we still know about them. Yeah. So God has given us this ability through all of these different technologies that we get so much more information now than we had. And it's like, you can really start to see how these things converge together. And the enemy wants to use that system, but that doesn't mean we can't use that system as well. Sure,
absolutely. And then you got the rise of AI, singularity, consciousness, which I believe is utterly demonic. They're implanting people with chips, with things that'll change your DNA. This is, when you, in my opinion, when we add all these things together, we're in a window of time that's absolutely unprecedented. I'm not a date setter. That's number one. I'm not. But I will say this. I think the return has got to be soon, because you can't fix this anymore. 30 years ago, I would have said, we can fix this. Now, it's like, there's no way you can fix this. I don't care who's in the White House. There's no way you can fix this anymore.
Well, and it appears that there are some very intelligent and very powerful people who have no interest whatsoever in fixing this. And in fact, there's I made the argument to somebody recently. I said, if the Fed's job was to completely destroy the U.S. dollar, would they be behaving any differently? And I don't think they're a bunch of idiots. Job. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and I think there's an agenda behind it. So to summarize the very thoughtful answer you've provided to the original question of what in the world is going on, you're saying go look at the private briefing that Jesus gave to his disciples in Matthew outside of the temple and look around, because that's what's going on. It sounds
Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Matthew, Mark, and Mark 13. Yeah,
Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13.
Yeah, those are the three synoptic gospels that talk about exactly what we're talking about. So, this isn't, Jesus says, many will come in my name, men faint for fear of what's coming upon the earth. We didn't even touch the whole UFO phenomena stuff. So, men faint for fear of what's coming upon the earth. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. We're in the window. We are in the window. I don't know how much longer this thing can go on. One of the things I truly believe is that Russia, Putin, has been saber-rattling, and Medvedev also, the use of nukes. They said it right on the record. If we lose the war with Ukraine, we will nuke Washington and London. That's saber-rattling. I get that. But it's out there. That 20 years ago, no one would even think about stating something like that. Now it's out there. And we're always told that the Russian guys are bad and the Ukrainian guys are good. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt places on the planet. Biolabs, American-run biolabs were there. The whole thing is corrupt. All the czars and
oligarchs.
All the oligarchs. It's just, you got making this stuff up. The American people don't get anything. Shut up, pay your taxes, watch the football game, go to a concert.
Here's what to think. So, Brian, I know you've got a question. I don't want to dominate all the questions. So I know Brian's got some thoughts, and then Dan will take it away.
I think me and Dan are kind of going in the same direction. So he's gonna ask about the origin of extraterrestrial beings, I believe. I'm going to talk. I want to ask about your take on. So in recent years, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the work of people like Derek Gilbert and
Sure.
Dr. Michael Heiser, the former, when he was still around. From the Christian perspective of the understanding of demonic forces and demonic origins, this narrative of, no, they're not fallen angels. They are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that were destroyed. How do you approach that? Do you agree with that? We do here, but I want to get a take for someone who's been studying Nephilim longer than anyone else, for real, and has this background knowledge and this understanding. And the other question that I always have is, you get people who talk about the influence of the hybrid breeding programs and the Nephilim, what happened before. And I'm like, it seems to me like that stuff's still going on, but you have some people who hedge their bets and they really don't want to talk about things maybe going on still today. They want to kind of say, well, that's what happened before, but we can't trace anything to what's going on today. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's
really
true. Yeah. So I wanted to get your take on that.
And for our listeners' benefit, we're talking to the guy who's actually done the DNA studies on some of the very, very hard to explain things like elongated skulls, where if you look at them, they're not people. There's just no other way to put it. It's something else. And LA's actually gotten up to his neck in the science behind it.
Yeah. I don't want them in my Soylent Green. So right. No.
Okay, so first of all, Genesis 3:15. This is the gateway to the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative. If we come to an understanding and good exegesis of Genesis 3:15, then the rest of the Bible opens up, because it's all about Besit. And I'm talking, I learned this from my elder brother, Gary Stearman, who gave this lecture about a decade ago at the Alma Trail of the Nephilim conference in Ohio. It was the first conference where we actually exposed that these earthworks were not done by Amerindians. They just weren't. And that's what we're going with. The next two films on the Alma Trail of a Nephilim series will put a nail in that coffin for anyone who is intellectually honest, but I digress as usual. Genesis 3:15. Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus, is in the garden. You got the dragon over here, you got Adam and Eve over here. And that's a 3-hour conversation. But Jesus says to the dragon, your seed, your offspring, will be at war with the seed, the offspring of the woman. The seed of the woman, the proto-evangelium, the Messiah, will crush your head, you will bruise his heel. That's the whole Bible. That's it. Everything revolves around that one statement, in my opinion. Everything. All the bloodlines, everything about Messiah, everything about the Antichrist, everything, that is the springboard. That's the gateway, whatever analogy you want to put it. So 3 chapters later, in Genesis 6, the seed war erupts big time. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful and desired and took wives, plural. So now we're not looking at monogamy here. We're looking at, polygamy. And who knows? The whole thing is corrupt, including the animals. And it's not a weekend frat party. They're here for at least 450 years. This thing is going on and on and on and on. And they are completely corrupting the genome, corrupting the bloodline, corrupting everything. And see, if we understand Genesis 2:15, when we get to Genesis 6, we go, aha, the seed war. But if we don't, then the God of the Old Testament is this maniacal, capricious, bloodthirsty, hates certain people. He's just going to wipe everybody out. I mean, but that's not who he is. He's a God of love and long-suffering, merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and full of unfailing love. Psalm 103.
Exodus 34.
Yeah. So that was what I quoted was Psalm 103, my favorite psalm. But, merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and full of unfailing love. That's who he is. Those are some of his attributes, which are incredible. I love it. Slow to anger, full of unfailing love. Whew, wash me with that, please. I need that every day. So Genesis 6 is the flood. And when the flood happens, everybody but 8 people on board that ark, everybody genetically contaminated on some level, including the animals. How do we know this? The Book of Enoch, which is people have trouble with the Book of Enoch, tells us exactly what's going on. The fallen angels sinned with the animal kingdom as well as the human beings. So you've got fallen angels coming down and taking wives, fallen angels taking human wives, creating a hybrid known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim are destroyed in the flood. The disembodied spirits of the Nephilim become the earthbound demons that wander the earth. That's who the demons are. Demons are not fallen angels. They're not. Demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So
I want to just take a quick aside here, because this is really, really helpful for people to recognize. Some of this gets softened in some of the modern Bible translations. We were teaching in 1 John recently, and there are things that are translated as untrue spirit or unclean spirit when the Greek says wandering spirit. And so there's a lot of things where when you start to look at this particular narrative, and this particular narrative, it's not an obscure narrative. This is the story of Scripture. Then you can see direct references to these things, even in the New Testament. Why would they say wandering spirit? Well, wandering spirit is not a synonym for a confused spirit. It's referring to a specific kind of spirit that specifically has a history, that is wandering for a good reason, and that's the sort of thing that LA is describing. So when you understand these things, the Bible starts to make more sense, and you start to pick up on details that are really light up the room a little bit when you see the connections being made.
Yeah, and this is, again, once we plug in the seed war, then Genesis 6 makes perfect sense. Then the Tower of Babel, when Nimrod becomes Geborim through ritualistic sex magic. I wrote about this in the Cosmic Chess Match. Tom Horn also wrote about this. Dr. Mike Heiser, talked about it briefly also. My mentor, Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, elaborated on this. Pember talks about it. Finally, you get Abraham and the kings. Well, what the heck is that about? Then after that, you get the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. 44 years ago, when I was a brand new Christian, when I got to the flood of Noah, I was completely confused. Why is he doing this? Jesus, I get. The God of the Old Testament, I'm not buying this guy at all. We got two different things here. I'm not sure what I'm looking at. By the time I get to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right, I've at my wit's end. Then when we get to the conquest of Canaan, the promised land, I'm sitting there, I'm ready to throw the thing against the wall, walk out of the room. I'm done. I'm toast. I can't do this. I have no idea what's going on. This is crazy. Well, once we plug in the seed war, it's like a set of dominoes. The pre-incarnate Jesus appears to Abraham. There are two angels with him. The angels go to Sodom and Gomorrah. They have to get Lot out before they destroy the city. In my opinion, that's a type of rapture. Pre-trib rapture. I know I'm going to wrinkle all sorts of feathers with that one. Same thing with Noah. Before the judgment, before the flood, Noah's taken out, sealed into the ark by God himself. That, in my opinion, is a foreshadow of the pre-tribulation rapture. Because before the wrath comes, he's taking the good guys out. I'm a good guy. At least I hope I am. I'm saved by the blood of Jesus, certainly not by my own works and my own depravity, but I digress. We know from this incredible scenario, Jesus appears to Abraham. Abraham kills the fatted calf. Jesus says, this time next year, you're going to have a kid, a baby. They're in their 90s. Hello. Sarah's laughing because she knows that this is never going to happen, right? And then, of course, I'll skip a little bit. So Abraham disobeys and goes down to Egypt. Oh, she's my sister. She winds up in the harem. You don't put 90-year-old women in a harem. That's not going to happen. So Chuck Missler, I got this from Chuck. Chuck used to say that God rejuvenated them in some way, which is freaky when you think about it. Because both of them, they're way past the age of making anything happen with childbearing. And all of a sudden, Abraham wakes up one morning, he's kind of going, this is pretty cool. And Sarah's going, wow, I'm getting my moon cycle. What's going on here? The wrinkles are going.
I want to point something out that we kind of gloss.
Young.
We gloss over in these stories, both in the Sodom and Gomorrah story and in the story of Abraham and Sarah. There's something that these people are seeing in these other people where they're saying, I have to have sexual relations with that. It's a compulsion. So this is not just a like, oh, well, there's an attractive person. Abram knows going to Egypt. He's saying, no, they're going to take her from me. Because there's something going on here. Or when you look at the Sodom and Gomorrah story, there's a little bit more than just some excited, lustful folks out there, because they get struck with blindness and they don't care. They're still going full speed. Yeah, so there's an absolute compulsion. And I think there's something about this that we're not understanding, where they're seeing some feature, some element of these beings or of these people. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. There was this very corrupted genome, and they're seeing either something that is completely uncorrupted or offering something in a genome that they're not otherwise recognizing, where they're going, I have to have that and I'll do anything to get it. And Abram's walking around going, anywhere I go, these people are going to take my wife. And that's a little bit more than just, hey, I've got an attractive wife. I mean, there's a lot of, all those kings probably had, the conventionally attractive wives, but there's something about Sarah where he's going, no, this is high stakes. They will literally murder me to get her no matter what. So I've got to start lying. So I think we need to step out of our conventional social explanations of these and say, no, this wasn't just, Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a little bit more going on, because I know some guys who are pretty randy, but they don't get struck blind and still try to break down doors to get to somebody that they saw passing in the street. That's a little something else is happening there.
Recently on the way back from Orlando, some guy in the seat in front of me was watching Legend, I Am Legend, and so I've seen the movie. So I just fast forwarded the movie to the very end where he's, they're attacking him. They've breached the house and they're completely rabid. They're insane. That's what we're looking at with Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. That same, if you want to call it a mental state. And the hybrids today are like that. I'm skipping hybrids. Nephilim hybrids are here. All right. Karen Wilkinson talks about it. I know Vicky dances around it a little bit. This is my wheelhouse. We've made films on this. Number one in the UFO series with Al Matthews, who was taken from the time he was 6 years old, to number 4 in the series on abductions, where Karen Wilkinson is there, Al Matthews is there, and Emil Jurek is there. All these guys have been taken, men and women have been taken at very young age, and sperm from the men, ovum from the woman. And the hybrids are in a fixed state. The hybrids are just obsessed with mating. That's all they care about. We're coming out with a film. It's called The Best of Supernatural Confrontations, sometime this year, God willing. And the story is, this is in Norway. So a husband and wife are in the store. It's a beautiful summer morning, two summers ago now, not last year, but the year before that. That's how long ago this was. And they're in the store and they're just shopping. It's a beautiful day the aisle, 50 feet long. At the end of the aisle, this woman just appears out of nowhere. She's kind of wearing a see-through dress without any underwear. And it's like, instead of walking down the aisle, she slithers down the aisle standing upright. She slithers like this down the aisle. And she's about 5 feet away from the guy. The woman is hiding behind the vegetable stand. She's totally freaked out, the wife. And she lifts up her dress. And again, she's not wearing any underwear. And she's glaring at this guy with utter hatred. I mean, that's crazy, right? And obviously it's not human. And he has the presence of mind. He looks away and then he goes, the Lord rebuke you. And it's like a shock wave. Bam, all of a sudden she's 50 feet away at the end of the aisle. And she's there for a period of time. And then she just gone, just like that. I mean, what do you do with that? They're walking amongst us and they're completely obsessed with having sex. Just like, people go, God, why would God allow this? Why does God allow Sodom and Gomorrah? It's almost exactly the same thing. They don't care about the daughters. They want to have sex with these two guys. I mean, it's just, I'm not making this stuff up. And you say, well, why does God allow it? Because we're in a cosmic war with the dragon. And this will continue until the rider on the white horse breaks through with the armies of heaven on the field of Armageddon. And out of his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike the nations. He will rule them with a rod of iron. I believe that sharp sword, it says he holds all things together. He holds all things together. He just stops holding them together. All of these creation, they all have free will, but we're not lopping heads off like in the Lord of the Rings. We're not doing that. I don't think. We watch him, and out of his mouth comes this sharp sword. It's not a literal sword, but he just stops holding them together and they just melt right where they're standing. And that's why the blood goes up to the horse's bridle. He just undoes them. That's conjecture. You can't hang your hat on that, but it's conjecture, and that's what I think he does.
This is a safe space for conjecture. And I think what you're getting at is that things make a lot more sense when we quit trying to force comfortable conventional explanations on them. There's a lot of Bible stories, and as we just discussed, where if you try and just put a conventional social Western explanation on it, they don't make sense. We look at the Tower of Babel, for example, which if you see our logo, there's the Tower of Babel with a UFO. We had fun with it, but the point is, you can try to make a conventional explanation that these guys are building a tower to heaven and that it actually that God actually took it seriously. But you can't explain that conventionally. You have to put supernatural explanations on some of these things, or you have to say, hey, there's more going on here than meets the eye, or what met the eye is not the thing that we're used to meeting our eyes. So Dan Rundio, I know you've got a question. What do you have for L.A. Marzulli?
Yeah. So when I was talking with my wife about some of this stuff a couple weeks ago, and she said, the problem with the modern day church is they have such a truncated view of the supernatural. I'm like, you just quoted L.A. Marzulli. Do you even know that?
You quoted L.A. Marzulli on Blurry Creatures. We're getting pretty meta here. So.
But anyway, we were just talking about like the supernatural and the spiritual, and in the church we so often use the word spiritual to say something that we don't really mean, and not that we don't mean it, but we think of it as something that's kind of wispy and somehow less real than actual reality, or as we experience it. I know we talked with John Burke, who wrote Imagine Heaven and Imagine the God of Heaven recently, and he talks about these NDEers explain their experience as so much more real than what we think of as reality. And so you talk about interdimension. I've heard you talk about the extraterrestrials being more interdimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we got these words like interdimensional or spiritual or supernatural. How would you describe the difference or overlap between those terms?
Well, I mean, an interdimensional entity that pops into our space-time continuum has the ability to manipulate space-time, matter, and energy in ways that we don't understand. So when I'm speaking to a New Age crowd or that believer visited by extraterrestrials, I give them this example. I go, okay, so here's the deal. This guy is chained to a wall, a prison wall, all right? So a couple of guys in his cell. All of a sudden, an entity pops through, and the entity somehow releases this guy from the chains. Then the prison door opens by itself. This entity isn't fiddling with keys. He just manipulates the lock and the door opens by themselves. So this prisoner and this entity walk out into the corridor. All the guards are switched off. They're all asleep. Now, that doesn't work. How does that happen? Finally, they get to the main entrance. That door opens up. The main gate opens up, and they all walk outside. Then the entity disappears. And I go, how many of you in the audience thinks that this is similar to the modern day abduction phenomena? Most every hand goes up. And I said, great, you just listened to Peter's jailbreak, which is in the biblical prophetic narrative.
Acts chapter 5. Right?
That entity was a good guy that was sent to get Peter out. But the bad guys do exactly the same thing. They pop in, right? They levitate you off your bed. That's manipulating space, time, matter, and energy. Never seen anybody levitate. And then they bring you to the window. And you're thinking, are they going to open the window? But they don't open the window. And you go right through it like that, right through the window.
So
and into the craft.
The follow-on or the corollary question, I guess, is that I would want to say that the beings that are perpetrating these things and doing these things are essentially those fallen Elohim, as opposed to specific spirits of the Nephilim. Do you understand what I'm saying?
The spirits of the Nephilim are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, destroyed in the flood and destroyed with the conquest of Joshua and Caleb, become the demons that wander the earth.
Correct.
So the dragon, this is conjecture, the dragon knows this, but a demon, in order to manifest, have to inhabit a body, an animal, or an object. So the dragon goes, I'll create an avatar. And he creates a biological suit for the demons to inhabit. Now they can manifest in our dimension. Right. And those are the gray. Those are the grays. The grays.
But then you got the Nordics and you've got these other ones.
Yeah, the Nordics, that's a whole different deal.
Right. So my point is that the actual beings that were created by God and are not a product of the hybrid, right? The angels, if you will, the Apkallu, the Anasa, whatever you want, the different words that different societies have used to describe them.
I think is what
Anunnaki, Anunnaki or Apkallu or whatever, but they're still active as well.
Yes.
And they're the ones that are the brains behind the operation, so to speak.
Some of them are in Charteris, but not all.
Yeah, correct. And so my thing is that there's a lot of ministries that have been around, and there's deliverance ministries, and their entire view of the biblical structure and hierarchy is wrong. How do we reconcile people who say demons are just fallen angels and we know how to deliver you from them, when it's just not, it doesn't actually line up with reality? And you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree with you. This is why when I'm speaking at conferences, I make that differentiation that fallen angels are not demons and demons are not fallen angels. They're not. And then there's a whole hierarchy in the angelic realm that we're not we're not privy to. We just know that there's, guys like Michael, who seems to be a pretty heavy dude, but then you get the cherubim, who are placed in guardians of the East Gate in Eden. The heck is that about? It's like we get this much of a picture that's really big. And so there's a lot of things we don't understand. Like when Michael and his angels fight with the devil and his angels, I call it the Great Eviction Notice, Book of Revelation. And so those fallen angels are cast down to earth. Right now they're in the second heaven. So they're cast down. It's the Great Eviction Notice. And, the enemy knows his time is short. How does he know that? How does he know his time is short? But he knows his time is short because they can see through time differently than we do. They're not all knowing, but they see through time different than we do. So it's the supernatural world is complex. The churches, unfortunately, and I'm part of the church, but much of a church is catatonic at this point. I mean, they don't understand. Look, I'm here in Southern California. I was invited to one church this year so far in Southern, and I've already said it, and if you're a church in Southern California, I'll come and speak for free. I will, because I don't, I'll just drive there. If it's within, 150 miles of where I live, I'll come and speak for free. No takers. One church. And we went and we spoke. There were 70 people in the audience. That in itself is hysterical, right?
Wow. Well, Ellie, we want to respect your time. Can you take these last couple of minutes and speak to the people who just in the last few months have started to have some wake up call about this, but they're believers, they love Jesus, they have their Bible, and there's always there's that ontological shock. And we kind of describe it as the whole world takes on a little tilt for a little while. And usually, the spouse is like, hey, why are you freaking out?
Yeah, right.
And so there are a lot of people who are kind of crossing the threshold and going, oh, it's real. There's a whole nother layer to this, or there's a lot more going on than I realize. And that's very upsetting to people. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, everything that we talked about tonight or today was based on the biblical prophetic narrative. And it's like, I stand on the words of Jesus. We talked about Matthew 24 and Luke 21 and, all that. Take care, Brian. Nice to meet you, sir.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. In Mark 13, I'm not making this stuff up. All we've done in our ministry is connect the dots. And our mission statement is to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air and to herald the return of the King Jesus, which is what we've done in the last hour. We've exposed what the enemy is up to, what the end game is. I mean, we scratched the surface. If you want to do a deep dive, go to my website, lamarzulli.net, or the streaming site. You can download 28 videos, each one for less than a price of a cup of coffee. Hello. And that's streaming.lamarzulli.net. It's just amazing. I have all these resources, and it's like, it's not like we're thousands of people go there and download them. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable.
Well, we'll absolutely be linking to some of these things, and from our loyal dozens of listeners, you're going to get some good traffic there. Where else can people find you? What are you working on that you're excited about? I do want to give a shout out that you just did a really neat piece on Roswell, which is an underappreciated topic. People roll their eyes at Roswell, but it's fascinating, and the approach you took is really, really neat. What else are you working on that people ought to know, and where can people be finding all these things? Where do you want people to learn more?
Well, again, it's lamarzulli.net, or you can stream 28 films, streaming.lamarzulli.net. My business partner and I, Gil Zimmerman, are in the process of finishing up 9 and 10 in the UFO series, which is What is the Truth? We've got films, which I talked about a little earlier. We spent a lot of time filming in Ohio last year, and that's on the docket to get those films out sometime over the next several months. So I'm also speaking in Arkansas, not this weekend, but the following weekend, lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net, and you can, check out the links. So, we go out once or twice a month and we speak at all these churches and conferences and everything else. So
I've always wondered this, and I have nobody else to ask. Is Gilbert Zimmerman related to Fritz Zimmerman? Because I've got a couple of Fritz Zimmerman.
No, he's not. No, he's not.
Well, They should hang out anyway. I don't know if Fritz is still with us, but
Oh yeah, Fritz is here. Fritz will be. I talk to him at least once a month.
He was the first weird book that I bought where my wife was like, "What did you just buy?" And it was the Encyclopedia of Giants in North America, and I was like,
There you
"Look
go.
at this book." So, well, LA, we really appreciate it. We are so grateful for the work you're doing. I want to thank you for your dedication and the amount of kingdom impact you have had in being willing to speak out about these things, because the times are ripe. And you're right, we're not trying to name the hour or the day, but we are paying attention to the seasons, and we're seeing the seasons change. And you've laid so much groundwork and provided so much material, and been such a Mystery Bible on podcast, and so many others are what we are because of the kind of work that you and others like you. And there's not many others like you who have the amount of material and the amount of time and background in these things. So we're so grateful for you joining us. We hope we can overlap more. We'll be tapping you on the shoulder for other people that you think need exposure and need more people to know what they're doing, because that's part of what we're doing here, is trying to make sure people have good places to go. And we'll be linking to lamarzulli.net, among others. So I know we could do so many more hours here, but what you've covered so far, I think, is really helpful for scratching the surface and getting people pointed the right direction.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, guys, and we'll do it again in the near future.
Thanks, LA. And Mystery Bible On listeners, you know where to find more, and we look forward to the next episode.